If you want to start eating healthier or you want to start eating to support your fitness goals, this is the podcast episode for you. Today we are joined by Christina DaSilva, a registered dietitian, personal trainer, and group fitness instructor who will be talking to us all about nutrition and the foundations behind nutrition for your fitness goals. Just a little bit of background on Christina. She is a registered dietitian based out of Indianapolis, Indiana, where she's passionate about all things food and fitness, especially local coffee shops, teaching spin classes, and finding cool new places to hike. She received her undergraduate education from Purdue University, like myself, where she double majored in nutrition and dietetics and nutrition, fitness, and health. She also completed her master's degree in exercise physiology and her 1,000-hour dietetic internship at Florida State University. Christina has wanted to become a registered dietitian since she was 14, at which time she developed severe food allergies that made it challenging to fuel herself as a year-round athlete. Having since achieved her goal of becoming a dietitian, Christina has been able to help children and adults that are working towards a healthier lifestyle achieve both their nutrition and fitness goals by fueling properly. She currently works at Riley Children's Hospital in Indianapolis, where she serves as an outpatient cardiology dietitian. She also works part-time at the local YMCA as a registered dietitian, personal trainer, and group fitness instructor. Recently, she started her own private practice, Fit and Fueled LLC, with the goal of helping individuals optimize their health and performance both in and out of exercise and sport. So without further ado, let's dive into the topic of nutrition. For someone who is looking to get started with their fitness journey, how would you recommend somebody starts eating healthy? And I put that in quotations because it's a pretty broad statement.
It's a saying that you pretty much hear all the time, eating in moderation or balance. There are so many diets being promoted on social media, like intermittent fasting and keto and the carnivore diet. And honestly, there's no one right diet for everyone, but as a nutrition professional, I recommend not cutting out entire food groups, like trying to get in our whole grains, low-fat dairy products, leaner proteins, fruits, vegetables, so that we have an overall balanced diet. We're getting in all the nutrients that we need to, and we're fueling our body properly.
What are some of those critical nutrients that our bodies need? I know that there are a ton out there, but
Mhm.
if somebody were just starting out and they were to focus on maybe a few particular things to be mindful of, what would that be?
Mhm. Um, so if you're starting your fitness journey, I would recommend focusing on protein. Now, you don't have to overdo it and have two times your body weight in protein or anything like that. But there have been studies that show a higher protein diet paired with resistance exercise, can help improve your body composition and decrease your risk of chronic diseases and everything like that. So protein's definitely one of them. Another one is fiber. I feel like it's very underrated, but fiber is obviously important for your digestive health, but it's also super important for your heart health too. So when you're starting your fitness journey, you might have some body composition goals, but the main goal should probably be long-term health and functionality and everything like that. So we also want to look at our diet and try to prioritize that as well. So fiber is found in whole grains like brown rice, whole wheat bread, whole wheat pasta, fruits, vegetables. So when someone asks why is a fruit or vegetable so important, that's why, along with some of the other micronutrients that you don't see, right? Like vitamin C, iron, calcium, all those are super important to build strong bones and help you live a long, healthy life.
You mentioned aiming for that higher protein target. Is that specific to just people who want to build muscle? And then an additional question to that, what are some good foods to eat if you're looking to increase your protein intake?
Yeah. So it's actually interesting because protein is important for those who want to build muscle, but also those who want to lose weight, right? Because if you go into a calorie deficit, but you don't focus on protein, then a lot of the weight that you lose might be muscle mass. And you need muscle mass in order, like the long-term functionality that we were talking about, like have optimal health long term, but also a lot of people want to be toned or have a better physique, and you need muscle mass in order to do that. Increasing your protein is really important. The general recommendation that I usually talk about is about 1.6 grams per kg, which is about 0.8 grams per pound. And I don't recommend counting your grams of protein that you're taking in, but just trying to have a protein source at each meal and maybe at your snacks if you're snacking. So that could be chicken, turkey, fish, beans, nuts, seeds. Dairy is a really good source of protein too. I usually recommend lower fat dairy. So we're not taking in excess saturated fat or anything like that. But there are a lot of different protein sources out there. And if you're someone who doesn't like to sit down and have a meal of chicken or something like that, you can opt for plant-based sources or protein powders. Protein powders are a good way. If you don't like eating a lot of protein, you can put it in a shake or a smoothie or something like that to still get your protein in.
You talked about caloric deficit
Mhm.
and counting macronutrients, maybe counting calories. So tell me a little bit more about weight loss and the caloric deficit. There's a lot of conflicting information, especially on social media or online, about what it takes to actually lose weight. So could you talk about healthy approaches to weight loss and then also talk more about what is the caloric deficit and what are healthy ways to achieve that?
With a caloric deficit, you have to be a little bit careful, right? General recommendation is about 500 calories per day, trying to cut back on. So that could be a snack, that could be part of a meal, that could be a couple beers at night, like it could be anything. Um, but you want to be careful not to over restrict. Your body's metabolism is a little funny because if you do slightly restrict, but we still have a good protein intake, then our body will focus on losing fat mass, trying to preserve our lean body mass. But if we over restrict, our body can, oversimplified version of this, but our body can go into what's known as starvation mode. So, your body is not meant to lose weight. It's meant to preserve its weight. It's meant to be at a healthier weight. And in times of starvation or need, your body has a mechanism to prevent you from wasting away, basically. If you over restrict, let's say you only eat 1,200 calories a day, your body can think that it's starving and it will actually hold on to the fat mass, hold on to the weight so that you don't waste away, like I was saying. Your metabolism will slow down and it will make it harder to lose weight. So that's why we do want to go into a calorie deficit, but we don't want to do anything too drastic that our body is going to elicit a response that's counterintuitive for our goals.
If you were going to give someone like a specific checklist of things to follow if they wanted to lose weight, what would you
Mhm.
start with and what would that order look like?
So when we're talking about weight loss, I would definitely see what their diet looks like right now. I mean, if they're eating pretty, I don't like to use the word healthy. I like to use nutrient dense. If they're eating a lot of nutrient dense foods to start off with, maybe I'll see like what their beverage intake looks like. You kind of have to look at everything they're doing. So, general recommendation that I like to use for your meals is you want to try to have CPC at each meal. So that's a carb, a protein, and a color. Now, with our carbs, like I was saying before, you want to try to aim for whole grain carbs to have that fiber, gives you energy for a longer period of time and help you feel fuller for longer. So those things are like oats, popcorn, whole wheat bread, whole wheat pasta, like I was saying. So then with the protein, you want to have leaner meats, leaner protein options. And then with the color, you want to have either fruit or vegetable. It's a little hard to have a vegetable with breakfast, unless you have an omelet or a smoothie or something like that. But that's why it's either a fruit or a vegetable with each meal. Now, going off that, you want to try to construct your plate for promoting weight loss. So about half your plate should be fruits and vegetables. quarter should be protein and a quarter should be grains. Now, if you are trying to keep your lean body mass while you are losing weight, then maybe I would recommend having a little bit more protein than the general recommendation. Like right now, the general recommendation is about the size of your palm, size of your fist. Maybe I would have 1.5 times that size. So maybe with the knuckles too, or something like that, of a lean protein option. And so if we are trying to have more fruits and vegetables, if we are keeping our protein intake relatively high, then in general, your calorie consumption should go down if we are prioritizing fruits and vegetables because they are just in general lower in calorie unless we load it up with butter or cream or anything like that. So that's the general recommendation I like to make because as a dietitian, I don't recommend counting calories. I don't recommend counting grams and macros and everything like that. Now, if that's what works for you, that's totally fine. Like I said before, like there's no one right way to eat. And you might need to do it for yourself to know how many calories are in what you're eating, kind of just as like a reality check. But in general, there are ways that you can promote weight loss without having to do all that counting, like looking at your plate, trying to have half fruits and vegetables, etc.
I've heard this phrase a lot. I don't agree with it, but people have approached me and said this phrase. But what about for individuals who are quote unquote skinny fat? So they don't necessarily have an elevated BMI, but maybe they want to go into like a body recomposition, build up some muscle, lose a little bit of fat. What would you recommend for those individuals in terms of their fitness goals and then also adding in that diet?
Yeah, I've also heard this phrase a lot. I guess just generally, when I hear that phrase, I think of individuals who may have a lower lean body mass, but are still, like you said, within the normal BMI range. So, in order to gain fat mass, not fat mass, lean body mass, um, you do need to lift some weights. Now, that doesn't mean you have to become a power lifter and exercise for 2 hours a day. It can be something just as simple as HIIT training or functional training. It doesn't have to be anything crazy, but we do have to lift some weights, which is also really important for long-term health too, right? To build that lean body mass. So for those who are skinny fat, in quotes, I would definitely recommend making sure you have, I feel like I'm beating a dead horse, but making sure we have our protein intake. Now, if your protein intake is relatively low, maybe we don't need to increase to a greater level than what's recommended. We just need to make sure we're getting in our needs. Um, Making sure we're eating protein, making sure we are lifting some sort of weights, whatever that looks like for you. If you're more of a cardio person, that's totally fine. There are so many benefits of cardio. I would actually recommend doing both together, incorporating them both into your fitness routine. But it really is kind of just focusing on fixing our diet a little bit so that we are promoting lean body mass. And if you still want to lose fat mass, even though you're at a normal BMI, maybe going into a slight calorie deficit, but you do need to be in a slight calorie surplus if you're focusing mostly on gaining muscle mass.
Sure. And I've talked about this before in previous podcast episodes. But you have to challenge your muscles if you want to build your muscles. Then on top of that, adding in the higher protein diet to promote the recovery and the muscle building is absolutely
Mhm.
crucial in that process. So I think that that skinny fat goal of, losing a little bit of body fat, maybe building a little bit of muscle, you might also hear that goal being called getting more toned or being more confident in my skin or having my shirt fit better, that kind of thing. So I think that
Mhm.
that's a really common goal that a lot of people have in the fitness and diet realm. We refer to that kind of as that body recomposition. Just to kind of reiterate, what I'm hearing is a critical theme in any diet is get enough protein and have a good nutrient dense diet. Is that pretty accurate?
Yes, exactly. That's when you break it down to simple terms. Absolutely.
Going off of that, if somebody were, now we'll pivot to building muscle in particular, because we've already started that conversation, but if somebody is looking purely to build their muscles for whatever goal it is, so increase confidence, or maybe they just want to look better in the mirror or whatever build muscle goal that you have. So if somebody is to build muscle, we already know that you have to have enough protein, but what else should that individual focus on if that is their sole goal in their fitness journey?
You do need to be in a little bit of a calorie surplus if you want to build muscle, right? Because it takes your body a lot of energy to build muscle. It takes a lot of energy for your body to break down the protein in your diet. And if you are in a calorie restriction and you're trying to gain muscle, it's just not going to work because you're not consuming enough calories in order to do so. So I don't mean anything crazy. Like I don't mean getting to go to McDonald's every day and binge out on that.
They call that dirty bulking.
Yes, yeah, I have heard that too.
It's kind of a gross term, but I've heard it dirty bulking. So yeah.
Yeah, not necessarily dirty bulking, but making sure that we are taking in more calories just in general. So that could be from, like I said, lower fat dairy products. It could be from more whole grains. It could be like just adding in another snack or protein shake to our day. Like let's say you have 3 meals a day, 2 snacks, and you're not eating anything after dinner. If you really want to gain muscle, maybe we add in a snack after dinner. Could be something as simple as like a smoothie or something like that. If you're not even eating breakfast, trying to have something, even just a small thing in the morning. Because I know a lot of people aren't breakfast people, but it is the most important meal of the day. They aren't lying to you about that. So trying to just get in another fueling opportunity somewhere in the day.
For someone with the goal of gaining weight, we know that a caloric surplus is important in building muscle, but what type of a caloric surplus are you looking for? And then you said counting calories isn't necessarily the greatest thing to do for most people, but what would you recommend in terms of someone who wants to gain weight?
So, in terms of caloric surplus, I'll do that first. Kind of like we were saying for gaining muscle mass, I wouldn't recommend anything crazy, maybe just like 500 calories more a day. I mean, there's only so much lean body mass that your body can put on in a certain time period, right? So, if we're increasing our calorie intake by like 1,000 calories a day or even more, there's a good chance that your body's going to put on fat mass, which maybe that's what you want. Maybe that's what you need, which is totally fine. If not, then that's just going to be too much of a calorie surplus for your body to really handle. What I would recommend, like you said, I don't really recommend counting calories or anything like that. I would focus on higher calorie foods. Again, not like a big burger or anything, which there's nothing wrong with that, but that's not the only way to gain weight. Things like avocado, peanut butter, like nuts in general, whole fat milk. I know I said leaner fat milks, leaner fat dairy products in general, but if your goal is to gain weight, then having a whole fat dairy product it still gives you the calcium, the vitamin D, but it is also higher in calories. So that could be an option. Olive oil is a really good high calorie food product. So my background's in sports, so I have dealt with many people who needed to gain weight, especially in football. So it sounds a little weird, but we would make a weight gain shake. So it would be ice cream, potentially, whole fat milk. It could be fruits, so maybe some berries. You can make a PB&J one, so you can add in some peanut butter in there. It's going to sound a little weird, but drizzling a little bit of olive oil in there. I promise with all the other ingredients, you don't really taste it. And then you can add some honey because honey is also pretty high in calories. But I would say from my dietitian perspective, focusing on higher calorie, still nutrient dense foods to try to incorporate in your day instead of resorting to processed foods or like chips, snacky foods, that sort of thing.
I've heard
Okay.
a lot of people say, oh, all processed foods are bad, like don't eat that. And first of all, I think you can agree with me, like it's not great to demonize one type of food. But talk to me a little bit more about processed versus natural foods.
So yes, I totally agree. There are no good or bad foods. They're just foods that are more nutrient dense than others. So when we're talking about processed foods, it's actually a funny word because a lot of the food in our diets are processed, whether we like to think about it or not. Maybe too greater levels than others. But like even the ground meat packaged in the store, yeah, that's raw, that's natural, but it's still processed for consumption, right? It doesn't come like that. It's not natural like that. So a lot of foods in the stores nowadays are processed, and there's nothing wrong with that. I think maybe I shouldn't have used the word processed foods before, maybe just less nutrient dense foods. I think that every food has a place in your diet, right? Like if you are going out to dinner to a Mexican restaurant, are you not going to eat the chips because they are processed? I mean, I would eat the chips and guac. I mean, that's one of my favorite foods. But um, there are more things in life that are important than worrying about processed foods. I wouldn't say that you have to go crazy with moderation and justify everything you eat. Be like, oh no, it's okay. Or it's balanced. We're eating in moderation. But absolutely, like have your Doritos, have your Cheetos, have ramen, but maybe not every day of the week, right? That's what moderation really is, having it when you want it, not restricting yourself and saying, oh, this is a bad food, I shouldn't eat it. And then when you start eating it, you overdo it and binge. That's a really common cycle that I see in my line of work in pediatric cardiology. There's a lot of kids who their parents say these chips are bad, right? And so when they have the chips, they eat the whole bag because they're not good for them, quote unquote, and they feel the need to overdo it. All right. So if we are changing our mindset and saying, yes, this food may not be as nutrient dense, but it's going to nourish my soul. It's what I want in the moment. So I am going to choose to eat this right now. And then that's totally fine. Eat it and walk away. Go on with your day. Trying not to feel that guilt about any of it because, like I said, there's no bad foods.
So you're saying if I eat that one donut, I'm not going to die.
You are not going to die from
Okay.
your donut.
That's great to know. Great to know. Um, Going off of that, and this might get a little controversial. We before starting recording, Christine and I discussed, social media and some of the diets that get a lot of flack if you post against it, so to speak. So there's certain tribes of individuals who are very adamant about their diets. You also talked about at the beginning of this podcast, there's not one specific diet out there that is perfect. So, for the individuals who think that there is one end all be all diet out there, where do you think that stems from? And what advice would you give those individuals?
Yeah. Social media is hard, right? Because there's so many people, influencers, like fitness gurus or anything like that, that post what they eat in a day, like the what I eat in a day videos, or just post about the diet that they're currently following. And then if a viewer looks at it and sees that they have the physique that they want, whether it's genetics or earned or anything like that, they're just going to automatically, typically, correlate their physique with that diet. And they're like, oh, well, I want to look like them. So I'm going to follow this diet. But my recommendation, yes, there's so much misinformation out there. There is no one right diet for everyone. While I personally may not recommend like keto, carnivore, intermittent fasting, all that because they do have forms of restriction in them, right? And we're not trying to restrict any food that we eat. What I would recommend is for you as the viewer to take a step back, look at the diet and be like, would that be practical in my daily life? Can I do that until I'm 80? Right? Because this fitness journey that you guys are starting or that we are all on isn't for short-term goals. It is for long-term health. Maybe it is a body composition goal, but we don't want to get there and then lose it, right? We want to stay where we want to be. And if we see a diet that cuts out all carbs or doesn't let you have any fruits or vegetables or anything like that, is that really sustainable for you long term? Now, if the answer is yes for you individually, go for it. Go ahead and follow the diet. But a lot of my clients and patients that I know can't abide by a strict diet 24/7. And then when they fail and they don't abide by that diet, a lot of times there's some guilt for not adhering to whatever the guidelines are. And then they may fall off the wagon, as some people say, and then feel it like it's really hard to get back on. So, long-winded answer, but basically, is it sustainable for you to keep on doing until you're you're older and have a different what your life looks a little bit different?
Definitely. And that's something that I try to tell to my clients and anybody who wants to work with me is like, we have whatever this goal is in your fitness journey, but if we accomplish that goal, but then we take two steps back afterwards because you're not consistently doing what you were doing to achieve the goal, then it's all for a loss, so to speak. Like, yeah, we
Mhm.
accomplished it in the moment, but then that overall health, that those longevity benefits, if you just go back to your old ways, it's like we're kind of stuck. Um,
Mhm.
so it's definitely all about sustainability. Find something that works for you, something that is healthy in a sense, like nutrient dense, like you were talking about. Make sure you're getting in that protein. I think those are the two main things that I've learned from this podcast episode. But if you can do that and build those healthy habits, then you're going to be successful in whatever your fitness goal is. So,
Mhm.
to kind of wrap up our recording here, this is the fitness blueprint. So, if you were to give someone a blueprint for overall health, longevity, what are, maybe 3 to 5 bullet points that somebody should follow if they want to improve their health or accomplish their fitness goal with their diet?
Yeah. First bullet point, I would definitely say trying to have CPC at each meal. Carbs, protein, color. If you aim for that at your meals, you're set up pretty well to make sure you're getting in the micronutrients you need, the macronutrients you need, and just fueling your body properly. I didn't mention it before, but making sure we're fueling and recovering from our exercise. So taking in simple carbs, whether it's like applesauce, a banana, a granola bar, or something like that, something that could be digested quickly before our workout or eating maybe an hour or so before our workout to fuel our body for the activity. And then after the workout, having carbs and protein. So whether that's a meal or having like chocolate milk and a protein bar or a protein shake with or a smoothie with both carbs and protein, making sure we're replenishing our glycogen stores, replenishing our basically that means are replenishing our energy stores and then also helping to rebuild and repair the muscles that we had just broken down from our workout. I would recommend finding something that, like you said, sustainable for you. So everybody's life looks different. Everybody's desires looks different, food preferences, exercise preferences, etc. So whether it's, I'm sure you've mentioned in terms of exercise or nutrition, finding something that you can do long term, because that's really the point of our whole fitness journey. And then last but not least, I'd probably say just aim to get 1% better every day, whether that's fitness, nutrition. I mean, change is not going to happen overnight, and it's hard to change a lot of things at once. So if you're looking at your diet and you want to start eating healthier, quote unquote, trying to just change one thing. Like if you're eating white rice, maybe trying to switch to brown rice to get in a little bit more fiber. Or if you're not eating breakfast, trying to have just something small in the morning, right? It doesn't have to be anything drastic, but those small changes add up over time, and they will help you reach whatever your fitness goals or health goals are.
Okay, I love that. And I think that's a great place to wrap up this podcast episode. So, Christina, thank you so much for joining me. It was great having you.
Yeah, thank you so much. This was so fun.
Absolutely. So, where can people find you on social media, or how can people get into touch with you if they have any questions?
Yeah. So I do have a social media page. It is fit.n, like the letter N, fueled.rdn. So you can DM me there. I'll be more than happy to answer any of your questions. And I did actually just start my own private practice. So if you are looking for individual coaching, looking for someone to look at your diet and see where we can start with those small changes, feel free to reach out. I'd be more than happy to help.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Christina.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for joining me today for the Fitness Blueprint podcast. My name is Jackson Adamwitz, and you can find me on all social media platforms at Jackson Ryan Fitness. And you can also check out my website for more fitness and self-improvement resources, which is jacksonryanfitness.com. You can also find the Fitness Blueprint webpage there for all of our podcast episodes. Make sure that you subscribe to whatever platform you are on. Leave us a 5-star rating and share it with your friends so that we can help more and more people achieve their fitness goals. If you have any suggestions, comments, concerns, or anything like that about the podcast, make sure you contact us directly and we will address those in future episodes. Thanks for joining us today.